I am too. Well, let me formally introduce you. Magdalena's been teaching for 20 years. She started when she was 6. She studies at Green Hills, which specializes in exams. She uses films and images. She's a blogger at visualteachingblogspot.com, and she's also a member of the Visual Arts Circle, along with me and some of the other people that are here. I know Effie, Margarita, there's
Kathy.
some other, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
We were all together at the Image Conference in Athens, which is why I have this nice tan. But the Salonikis rules. Sorry. Okay, so you have your 10 minutes. Thank you for being here. Let me get your slide ready, and you have control, and take it away.
Okay, hello everybody, luckily I'm back. So we are going to talk today about creative reading techniques in exams groups, because that's what I do every day. I teach exam classes. Before we are going to talk about techniques, let me just give a quick overview what we usually teach. So there are those 3 parts now, like let's for example take Cambridge first. Multiple choice. What is practice? What skills? Reading for detail, opinion, main idea, and the attitude. Gap text, probably as you know from your students, it's the most difficult part and the least liked one, because it focuses on how to understand the structure and development of the text, and students usually don't like it. And the last part, part 7, is multiple matching, where you read for specific information, detail, and opinion, but it's probably the quickest part, and students usually do like it. Now, so how to, what to do? First of all, before I'm going to tell you what to do, let me just mention what students usually complain about, what they are worried about. So first of all, there is too little time. And I'm sure you agree that your students have the same problems. That's why all the exercise we design for them should have time limits for them to prepare for the exam. The second biggest problem seems to be vocabulary, too much of unknown vocabulary. So selecting and focusing on vocabulary is probably the key. And the third element the students mostly complain about is that they don't see the link between the questions and the text. My students usually say, Miss, the text is okay, the questions are okay, but they have nothing to do with the text. So what to do? I have the rule in my class that I can't be bored in my classroom. And because reading is not fun for a lot of students, I try to make it as interesting as possible. So first of all, don't be afraid to cut or blur the text. What can we cut? What can we blur then? We can cut off or blur a headline. And then, of course, you ask quiz students to quickly read the text in order in groups to write a suitable headline for the certain text. It can be even the competition whose headline is going to be closest to the original one. You can cut off or blur the first sentences from the text and give them separately. What I mean is that usually in the exercise when they have to match the paragraphs or the parts of the paragraphs back, they have to pay attention to the topic sentences, which are at the very beginning of every paragraph. And that's what we have to practice with them in order to make them aware of linking words, collocations, and the rephrasing of certain things, even the pronouns. The next thing you can do, of course, is to cut up and jumble the paragraphs. And it's something what we usually do with kids. But I think that that's something what we don't have to stop on higher levels, because it can be also fun and it's not boring at all. The last thing I usually do with my students referring to cutting is like, there is this part 7, there are 4 texts and 10 questions. So I make the text a bit bigger, cut into 4, put around my classroom and give 10 questions to students. Give certain time. that students, of course, let's say in 3, 4, 5 minutes, they have to find the answer to the text, to the 10 questions. What's the benefit? They usually have to get up. It's good for kinesthetic learners. And you know, students who are taking exams are usually 15, 16, 17, so they are too lazy, but you know, for them it's like a change. What I want to point out is that small changes make big difference. And sometimes changing the order or forcing the students to get up gives more oxygen to brain, and they are tempted to read more willingly. Read and tweet. Emmanuel mentioned a little bit something what I wanted to tell earlier. Read and tweet. I mean, there is a text and you give post-it notes to your students, and the students have to write a short summary which is suitable for the size of post-it note. And of course, the students have to rack their brains and think deeply how to put it in such size. You can also take a paragraph from the text and ask them to extend. Why? Because they're extending, they add linking words, they add different pronouns, they add adjectives. The words they usually don't pay attention to are putting back the paragraphs. Another interesting thing, I think we know about the websites, the Wordle, the word clouds, but when was the last actually you used it in the class? Because when I was preparing this presentation, I thought, I keep to forget about that, and it's really fun. I chose the elements of Halloween because it's next week, but I think it really works with the students, reconstructing the text from the words. So first, of course, you can use it as a warm-up because the key elements of the text that you put in the website, and it rechanges you and puts the vocabulary first. You can ask your students what the text is going to be about. You can also ask them to read the text, then take out the words, and of course, put 10 words on in front of the pair of students, and they have to put the words in the right order after reading the text. So they practice their memory skills as well. Remember, even changing the thing like printing out the text on a colorful paper. Make a copy on colorful. Why reading has to be, you know, black and white? It can be yellow, it can be purple, and it also changes a lot. Now, sneak preview is another thing that I use with students. So you have this FCE, for example, class, and you know the text is going to be the part of the lesson. So you ask them to have exactly 2 minutes to read the text and remember as much as possible. Now, out of your students, some of them are going to read only the subheadings. The other is going to read the whole first paragraph in detail. The other ones are going to read the whole text just briefly. So what you learn by this activity, the techniques like skimming and scanning, looking for details, practicing to focus on general idea. These time limits are really important because then, as we said earlier, it is probably one of the most difficult things for the students. So it's great for practicing quick reading and getting the message across. Now, looking for synonyms and paraphrasing. This was taken from this part 7 of the first exam, where we have 10 questions and 4 texts on the right. Now, of course, it's obvious that they have to answer the questions, but what we have to pay attention to are the underlined sections, the expressions on the words, and they have to find the synonyms or the sentences that paraphrase the word. For example, in this 45, cannot be clearly heard, in the text was virtually impossible to detect. Now, while slowly doing step-by-step such activities, students learn that they have to look for synonyms and paraphrasing the text, because that's the key to do the reading section. Now, retelling the story, that's what Emmanuel mentioned before he disappeared, that we can challenge the students by retelling. If there is a text, let's say on B2 level, and it's a narration, we can narrate it from a different perspective. For example, imagine that it's Little Red Riding Hood, so the perspective of the wolf, of the grandma, or the ranger. We can also ask them to retell in a different person. Now, our students, we want our students to read everywhere, and because everybody has the mobile phone with them, so I do encourage my students to download the application Squid. Then you chose Learning English, and there are very short texts for different levels. For example, is it true that we use only 10% of our brains? Now, what we have, the difficult words are highlighted, and when the students finish reading, then they have the comprehensive questions, or they have to guess the meaning of the words highlighted, which is what I mentioned before, perfect for practicing vocabulary. And the last thing is that, these are the more advanced groups. So you're not going to focus only on A, B, C, D. We know that reading is a springboard to practice other skills, productive skills, such as speaking or writing. There are a lot of exercises in exam classes by Peter May, but what I want to pay attention to are those questions which focus students on critical thinking. Like, do you find the writer's argument convincing? Is the writer impartial or biased in what he says? So that would be probably forcing them to think critically. Thank you very much. It was my first time in EFL Talks. I hope not the last one. Thank you once again, Rob and Maria.